You can't live trying to please everyone. Do that, and you'll spend your life chasing ghosts you'll never catch. In a world where everyone fights to be heard, Bob Dylan never shouted. He whispered, and the world listened. His words didn't roar. They reshaped music itself. With mystery instead of certainty, rebellion instead of comfort, and depth instead of noise, Dylan rewrote the DNA of modern sound. He gave folk its backbone, he gave rock its conscience, and through it all, he kept his ear tuned to rhythm, danger, and truth. Dylan has always been more than a creator. He's a collector of influence. Behind that unreadable stare lies a hidden archive of the albums he didn't just love, but revered. Records that didn't fade when the radio did. They built him, guided him, and stayed with him long after the applause stopped. When Dylan praised something, it meant the world. Because for him, music wasn't nostalgia, it was architecture. These weren't just albums he liked. They were foundations. So here are the 5 rock albums Bob Dylan held close, and the quiet reasons why. If you love stories that uncover the roots of greatness, this is Legend Uncovered. Subscribe and tell us, what album do you think left the deepest mark on Dylan? Number 1, The Rolling Stones. Let It Bleed It wasn't swagger or style that drew Dylan to Let It Bleed. It was the truth hidden under the glamour. Released in late 1969 as the decade collapsed into war and disillusionment, the Stones captured that chaos with elegance and decay. Dylan once said, "The Stones had the guts to get dirty with it, and nowhere was that clearer than here." From the haunting calm of Gimme Shelter to the gospel ache of You Can't Always Get What You Want, this album wasn't just rock, it was revelation. What Dylan respected most wasn't just their sound, it was their timing. As America spun out of control, the Stones turned collapse into art. While others tried to offer escape, they offered confrontation. Let It Bleed felt like a funeral and a rebellion, sharing the same stage. By 1969, protests were burning across campuses, Vietnam was at fever pitch, and Altamont was on the horizon. Dylan, who had retreated inward on John Wesley Harding, recognized that push and pull between public noise and private reckoning. In the Stones, he heard a band daring to score the end of an era with both rawness and grandeur. It wasn't just the hits that moved him. Midnight Rambler felt like a crime scene, part menace, part seduction. The title track, Smoky and Broken, sounded like a hymn to impermanence. Dylan once described Mick Jagger as a man who can dance around pain without flinching. That's what this record did. It danced through catastrophe. For Dylan, who always valued storytelling over perfection, Let It Bleed was sacred precisely because it wasn't perfect. Keith Richards's guitar didn't gleam, it haunted. The drums didn't march, they staggered. It wasn't about surviving the 60s. It was about admitting they were already gone and making that loss sound holy. The Stones didn't try to fix the broken world, they let it crumble with grace. And in that honesty, they reached a kind of salvation. Dylan didn't just hear a record, he heard an elegy someone else had already written for him. This was more than rock. It was a requiem with rhythm, a soundtrack to a generation learning how to fall apart beautifully. For Dylan, who spent decades chasing what can't be captured, Let It Bleed achieved the impossible. It stood still just long enough to let the world fall down around it. Number 2, The Beatles, Rubber Soul. By 1965, Dylan had already lit the fuse that changed music forever. But when Rubber Soul arrived, he saw something new. The Beatles had grown up. Gone were the love songs and simple choruses. In their place came poetry, reflection, and emotional complexity that even Dylan couldn't ignore. He later said that Rubber Soul made him realize that rock could be literature. Songs like Norwegian Wood and In My Life carried an honesty that felt familiar because it was the same. Honesty Dylan had been searching for, in his own words, John Lennon's vulnerability and Paul McCartney's melodic instincts gave Rubber Soul its dual magic, one half confession, one half dream. It spoke of love, guilt, regret, and self-discovery, the same themes Dylan was weaving into Bringing It All Back Home, and Highway 61 revisited. Dylan didn't just influence the Beatles, he was influenced right back. Rubber Soul opened his world to new sound textures, new language, and a bold new kind of songwriting that blurred every line between pop and poetry. For Dylan, this wasn't just an album. It was a mirror, showing him that even the most famous band in the world could be haunted by the same doubts he carried. Number 3. The band music from Big Pink, If Let It Bleed, was chaos. And Rubber Soul was growth, then music from Big Pink was homecoming. In 1968, long before they were icons, the band were Dylan's partners in crime, the musicians who helped him rediscover his roots after his motorcycle accident. In a pink house tucked away in upstate New York, they stripped music back to its bones. Dylan loved Big Pink because it was unpretentious. It didn't chase fame or fashion. It whispered stories of ordinary people, sung with extraordinary heart. Songs like The Weight and Tears of Rage felt like gospel, not the kind you hear in churches, but the kind that comes from dirt roads, whiskey, and long winters. It was Americana before anyone called it that. Dylan admired how the band turned simplicity into revelation. While the world was experimenting with psychedelic excess, Big Pink brought music back to soul and soil. Every note felt lived in. Every word felt earned. For Dylan, this record wasn't just a sound. It was sanctuary. Proof that you didn't need chaos to make something timeless. You just needed truth. Number 4. The Doors, Morrison Hotel by. 1970, Dylan had seen fame devour more than a few of his peers. But when he heard The Doors' Morrison Hotel, he found something rare. Balance. Jim Morrison wasn't trying to escape his darkness anymore. He was learning to live with it. That honesty, that acceptance, struck Dylan deeply. Morrison Hotel stripped away the acid haze of earlier albums and came crashing back to blues, grit, and soul. Songs like Roadhouse Blues and Waiting for the Sun showed a band growing into itself, not away from it. Dylan once described Morrison as a poet with too much fire and not enough sleep. He admired that tension, the beauty of someone trying to write truth faster than it could burn them. To Dylan, Morrison Hotel was the sound of survival. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive, and that's all that mattered. Number 5, The Who, whose next If Let It Bleed was a requiem, then whose next was a resurrection. By 1971, the world had grown tired of protest songs and broken promises. But The Who weren't done fighting, they just changed weapons. Who's next was raw power dressed in reflection. Pete Townshend's ambition, Roger Daltrey's thunderous voice, and Keith Moon's controlled chaos made it anthemic. But Dylan saw past the volume. He saw the spiritual exhaustion behind it. Songs like Behind Blue Eyes and Won't Get Fooled Again weren't about revolution anymore. They were about disillusionment. It was the sound of men who had seen the dream fail, but still had the nerve to keep dreaming. That honesty resonated with Dylan. He'd spent a career unmasking illusions, and Who's Next proved that rock could do the same. For him, it wasn't just a rock record, it was a confession shouted through amplifiers.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.